Hello, welcome to another episode of our live stream, My Journey to the Trinity. My name is Hussein. Happy to be with you. Happy to be with me. Some of you might wonder why my name is Hussein. I know. You know what? What happened is we had to go uh, pick up some furniture and stuff, and so after work. So sorry I'm late. And but I guess you all have been already introduced to this the gift that keeps giving. Dude, we thought Muhammad Hijab was the gift that keeps giving. And then we thought Ali Dawah was the gift that keeps giving. And then we thought Yasser Qadhi is the gift that keeps giving. And yes, indeed, he is. He has dropped another nuclear bomb. And, you know, these these hadiths are on their way out. The hadiths are on their way out. The stuff that's going on with the hadiths. I don't know if you guys remember. It was about a couple of years ago that the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, Hamad bin Salman, he said, you know what, we don't really need these hadiths. He said we were going to just kind of burn these hadiths or throw them away and no longer apply them. He says, and since there's these thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hadiths, you know what we're going to do is we're going to just narrow them down to what's called the mutawatir hadiths. And there's only about 100 of those. And hadiths, you guys, are supposed to be the words and actions of Muhammad. So if you want to know what Muhammad did and said, you have to read the hadiths. Why? Because the Quran doesn't say nothing about what he did and said. The only thing you get a little bit of his arguments with his wife, with his wives, his sexual proclivities. You get a little bit about his the permission Allah gave him to engage in marital and extramarital, and you get bits and pieces like that. But actual words of Muhammad and the Quran commands Muslims. Obeying Muhammad is equal to obeying Allah in Islam. Obeying Muhammad is equal to obeying Allah in Islam, because it says, "Oh, Tir Allah wa Rasuluh." Obey Allah and His Messenger. So obeying Muhammad is equal to obeying Allah in Islam. And the hadiths are very important. Most of what Muslims do is from the hadith. It's not from the Quran. Okay, the Quran is so confusing. It tells you there's so little in the Quran that you can what to do, how to live your life, how to eat, how to sleep, how many wives, and which foot to put first when you go into the bathroom. All of these things are in the hadiths. About prayer, how to pray 5 times a day. That's not in the Quran. The Shahada, how to become a Muslim, that's not in the Quran. It's in the Hadith. Okay, how to relate to others, how to treat Christians. There's some very, tiny things in the Quran, but for the details, you need the Hadith. And the Hadiths, hello, Emmanuel, God bless you, and hello, Abla, Jedediah, and Andrew, and Tiger. I don't know. I'm so late. That I don't know. I may have lost some of my original viewers here. Wow, I have a lot of comments. I was very late today. We had a lot to do. Got off work late. Hello, Jake. God bless you. So anyway, so Yasser Qadhi comes out and he just kind of just says, you know what? A few years ago, Muhammad Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, said, let's get rid of the hadith. Let's throw them away and let's keep 100. Let's keep 100 of the gazillions of hadiths that there are. Let's just keep 100. Okay. And then he asked Al-Azhar University, Al-Azhar, which is the Sunni Vatican. It's the Vatican. I know there's people who say to me, no, it's not really that. Yeah, it's really that. It's that and more. You know, the Al-Azhar University is like the Sunni Vatican. And they said, okay, let's throw away the hadith. Let's get rid of them. Make our lives a lot easier. So they were willing to do it. Now they haven't done it, which I'm surprised. You know what? Now that I think about it, I really got to go find out what happened with it. I mean, it was a huge movement. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who is essentially the king, and Al-Azhar University agreed to get rid of the hadith. They just said, you know what? We can't live up to this. We can't judge people by this. Some of it is like confusing. Some of it's da'if. Some of it's masnur. Some of it's you know. Some of it's fabricated. Some of it's untrue. And it says so the king says we're just going to keep like 100 of them, 100 hadiths, which we call the mutawatir hadiths. Mutawatir means that it's been shared from multiple sources, to where, you know, you got like 10 people from different parts of the universe who knew these, and they said the same thing, to where you know that not one person made it up. And anyway, mutawatir. But anyway, you know, the topic kind of fizzled. I haven't heard anything about it. I don't know if Saudi Arabia has followed up on this. I'd be really surprised if they did that. I'd be really surprised if they did that. I'd be real surprised if the Muslims allowed them to do that, because the hadith, I mean, the sunnah is right up there. I mean, they consider it. Yes, he does. I think I have a very, very wishful theory that he is a closet believer in Jesus Christ, and he's just moving step by step to dismantle Islam. And let's pray, Ya Rabbi, Ya Rabbi, Ya Rabbi. Wow, wouldn't that be awesome? So anyway, in the meantime, Yasser Qadi is helping to dismantle Islam from this end. You know, he has been saying some stuff. He was on a program called, let's see what the name of it. It's called Skepsislamica. Skepsislamica. And this program, there's these two people who are interviewing him, and they are both Tehran and Roxana, and they've got like 78 videos. I think they are Muslims, but they're very educated in the West, and they really, that's like, dude, don't try the baloney with us. These guys know Islam, they understand it. And so they brought Yasser Qadi on to talk about Salafism, because, you know, he was a Salafi. And I'll just you know what, you guys, I got to be honest, I don't know that much. I don't know that much about the teachings of Salafism, not like Sam Shamoun or someone. But I do remember when I lived in the Gaza Strip, and I remember what they used to say about the Salafis. And they were they were considered the extremists, the radicals, was the Salafists. So, and I think that is still the case, that they are considered the radicals of Islam. So anyway, yes, the holes in the narrative on the increase. In honor of our friend Yasser Qadi, we got to play this.
That the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say.
It's got more holes than you can imagine now. And he just added a whole bunch of new holes. holes today. And so let's just watch this. Now, I'll be honest with you. I did watch, because I know Jay Smith was on Hatun's program, so I watched, he spoke about this. And there was somebody else who spoke about it too. I'm not sure if it was Jai and Daughter of Christ, or Jai and Daughter of Christ. There was somebody else who did. Oh, Chris from Speaker's Corner. Chris from Speaker's Corner also did something about this. And so I did watch a little bit of it. Well, actually, I listened to most of it. But then my earbuds, the battery went out, so I couldn't hear. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to watch this together, see what we can learn. Now, these guys, Chris from Speaker's Corner, he said he really likes the channel. He likes this channel, which is a Muslim channel. It's called Skepsislamica. And so let's just now these guys are Muslims. You can tell the guy's got the Quran Surah up on his wall and everything. So let's just go ahead and listen. And you know what? I don't have I don't have any time stamps or anything like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and play it from the. I believe it's from the hour and 20 minutes. So let's just listen to a little bit.
Even for any, I wouldn't get any money for this because I believed in the cause, right? Salafism really gave life to a new generation of second generation born and raised Muslims who didn't find the cultural Islam of their parents to be relevant. Salafism was a spark, an exciting spark. I remember as a teenager, it was authentic, looked to be. It gave this academic veneer that wasn't found in the dull, boring, cultural, tame version of Islam of my parents, right? And so you find meaning and purpose, and you are willing to sacrifice. I sacrificed time, effort, and money as a teenager, and I gave up my career as a chemical engineer. I had to offer at Dow Chemical. Everybody knows that it's in my biographies. I gave up Dow Chemical to go study in Medina, not because Saudi Arabia gave me money, because I believed in the cause. And it was something that inspired me. So I don't view it in this simplistic manner. I say that the positives of Salafism need to be understood, and the impact that it causes on people and it caused on people needs to be understood. And to dismiss it in this manner, oh, Saudi funded. No, I'm sorry, that is not the case.
Just in terms of sort of false characterizations or previous narratives that you're trying to correct in your book, you are quite critical of
previous narratives, like holes in the narratives.
Previous academic attempts to offer a typology of the Salafi movement while presenting one of your own in the introduction. How does your typology fix the problems found in those that precede your book?
So this is a difficult question to answer in a few minutes. One of the problems of past typologies, there's multiple problems. Firstly, anytime you want to categorize, you're automatically giving your own biases rather than the biases of the objects you're categorizing, right? So if you enter a room with lots of people, do you want to categorize them based upon gender? Do you want to categorize them based upon height, based upon skin color, based upon ethnicity, based upon profession? The minute you do so, the room is the room. You say more about yourself than you do about the room when you categorize. Of course, Edward Said points this out in Orientalism in a much more profound manner. In constructing the other, you betray your own identity. So one of the problems of previous categorizations is that they're approaching Salafism from their own lens. And especially after 9/11, that lens was completely political and jihadi. And to me, political and jihadi manifestations of Salafism are trends that you find in all movements, not just Salafism. You will find Sufi jihadis, you will find Sufi pacifists, you'll find Sufi politicos, and you'll find Sufi quietists, right? So this notion that what is characteristic about Salafis is how they view politics, how they view the ruler, how they view jihad. The same you can copy and paste and move on to Ash'arism or other trends as well. This is one of the things that irritated me. Another thing is that it's not organic enough, because there are variables that might be unique to one culture and not to another. So what I proposed was an organic multivariable. And therefore, I present a typology. It's too complicated to explain in 2 minutes. Basically, I present a model. That model, any researcher can take that model and create a new one for their particular book in 2 minutes. Based on my model, it's like a tool that will allow them to extrapolate what they want to emphasize.
Okay, just so you know, Yasser Qadhi wrote a new book about Salafism, and so that's what he's talking about. But and so his topic is not really what we're talking about the Hadith, but he went into it. And so I just want to kind of listen a little bit, just to kind of give us a little background to what he's talking about. This really isn't our topic, but he's going to get into the topic in a few minutes here. So I know it's a little bit boring, but we'll just listen a little bit.
In categorizing Salafis, right? So it's organic and fluid. The term fluid is popular these days. It's multivariable. Multivariable, you can pick and choose what you want to highlight, and you will admit to your audience, this is my bias. And I'm using this because I want to categorize Salafis based upon this particular variable. So this is why I believe that what I proposed, it's a more of a 3D than a stagnant 2D, if that makes sense. It allows for some fine-tuning and can be copied and pasted and then utilized for your specific purpose, and nobody can accuse you of bias because you know where it's coming from.
Addressing the most controversial strand of Salafism that you spend a lot of time on in your book, what does most of the political and academic analysis of jihadi Salafism, particularly that conducted by Western institutions, ignore about the causes of the movement in your view? And how effective do you think the response has been, both from Muslim scholars and maybe non-Muslim institutions, have been in challenging and refuting the theological interpretations that underpin that movement?
Excellent question. What have been the few main things that academics have ignored about jihadi Salafism? 2 points. Number one, jihadi Salafism is always a fringe of mainstream Salafism, and it always has been pre-Ibn Abdul Wahhab. Ibn Abdul Wahhab definitely created a jihadist streak, but then the third wave eliminated the jihadist streak. That was what the second and third wave did, right? And so the way Salafism existed, in the year 2000 was by and large non-jihadist academic. And so jihadi Salafism is an aberration for its time and place to the mainstream Salafism of its time and place. Most academics ignored this, and they simplistically, the 9/11 Commission report from the United States Senate and government literally lists Ibn Taymiyyah and Bin Laden in the first paragraph of its book. They list Ibn Taymiyyah and Bin Laden. So to simplistically claim, and when I was first preaching and teaching, when I first came back from Medina, the term Salafi in the modern discourse was synonymous to jihadi and al-Qaeda. The term Salafi.
See, that's what I thought, because when I lived in Gaza, when they talked about Salafis, these guys were considered like the al-Qaeda type.
Salafi was synonymous to jihad and al-Qaeda. And that is why I had a severe pushback from many segments when I tried to claim that I'm pacifist Salafi, for example. I would claim this publicly in 2004 and 5 and 6 like that. I would say this publicly, I'm a pacifist Salafi. What do you mean a pacifist? There's no such thing. How is there a pacifist Salafi? So this is, I think, one of the biggest misunderstandings, right? Another misunderstanding, and this is without a doubt the number one with all books written about jihadi movements, all jihadi movements, the obsession with understanding jihadi movements solely from the lens of religion and Islam and fiqh and Quran, minus the political reality and the very real social grievances that the jihadists have that has actually caused the movement to be formed. Jihadi movements have much more to do with the politics of the world and with post-colonization and with the effects of the Cold War than they have to do with Ibn Taymiyyah.
So you want to make sure you get a little jab against the West in there, saying that it's a kind of like uprising as a result of colonialism. Yabaye, that word colonialism, as if Islam wasn't colonialist when they went to Spain, when they went to Sicily, when they went and started the mafia there, and tried to get into France, but were beaten back.
And hardly any academic is brave enough to acknowledge that. You need Ibn Taymiyyah to construct a response. But the catalyst for the reason for constructing the response is not Ibn Taymiyyah. It is the grievances that jihadi movements have against the realities taking place. So I think these are some of the biggest misunderstandings. What was your other question about this, the jihadi movements?
In terms of how effective do you think Muslim scholars have been in challenging and refuting the theological interpretations that underpin the jihadi movement?
So I believe this still requires a little bit of effort. And one of the reasons being, now we've gone through 3-4 phases, right? So I've been preaching for the last 30 years in the Western world, 27 years. I came back 2004, right? So 22 years, yeah. And since I have come back, we have seen the rise and the fall of Al-Qaeda, the rise and the fall of ISIS, and now the issue of Palestine and Gaza. And in all of these cases, the rhetoric of jihad in some of the segments of the ummah has been there. Until you solve the problem of the displaced people and the people that are being bombed and the people that are being slaughtered, how can you expect me to tap down or to placate legitimate anger and grievances? The problem is not coming from me or books of fiqh. The problem is coming from how you've treated 1 million Iraqis, how you've treated the entirety of Afghanistan, and now how you're treating 1.7 million Palestinians. How can I, as a theologian, be expected? What do you want me to do? You're the ones bombing. You're the ones, invading. You're the ones throwing.
I don't think he remembers something called October 7th. I don't think he remembers that.
Carpet bombs on Afghanistan and destabilizing Iraq and Syria. So unless and until socio-political solutions are given to the peoples, there's only so much we can do at the intellectual side. We can try to explain to them this is not the most effective, this is not the best mechanism. But what do you say to a group of people that are starving to death because they're literally being surrounded by an occupying force? Do they not have the right to fight back? I'm sorry to be blunt here, but...
Wow, he's justifying October 7th there.
Let's be real here. What would you do? What would anybody else do? What would any group of people do? So I have that's exactly why I have never, and even back then, and it was really difficult. You can read the New York Times article. Even back then, I never criticized the people of Afghanistan for what they did, and the people of Iraq for what they did, and the people of Gaza for what they did. I'm not in a position to do so.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. I don't want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but if someone else thinks that he wasn't justifying October 7th, if I misunderstood that, it sounded to me like he was justifying October 7th. Maybe I'm hearing it wrong, but October 7th happened
It's not my right. I have never once criticized what, and I have said even in public in 2000, early 2000s, what would you do if your country was invaded by a foreign nation, a foreign force, a foreign occupying power? What would you do? Who would be the patriot and who would be the tyrant and who would be the betrayer? I've actually said this in public multiple times without being too explicit, but you have to cause them to think here.
Right.
So I am not somebody who's going to pretend that no, our religion is a pacifist religion. We turn the other cheek. No, not at all.
You don't. Absolutely, you don't. But none of us thought that.
We're going to defend, and whoever has the right to
Not just defend, offend too.
defend should do so. But I'm an American citizen, and I have to ask myself, what is the best usage of my time and resources, and how will the Ummah benefit the most? And what is allowed for me as a Muslim carrying a citizenship? These are questions I've been very clear about. For the Western Muslims, they should not get involved in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan without a doubt. I've said this from day one. You're going to cause issues and problems, and you're going to cause, and is it a legitimate, if you jump in between Muslims fighting, which was what was happening in Syria, I'm talking about 10 years ago, right? You're jumping in between Muslims fighting there. So it's easier to talk about these realities once we can acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is the primary cause is not fiqh and Salafism and jihad.
Yes,
and no, the primary cause is the destabilization of these countries that our own countries have done. Once we can talk about that, then we can move to the tertiary issues and deal with it more effectively. Otherwise, we will always be impaired in offering real analyses. And if you read the New York Times article, it's 15, 16 years old now. You can Google it. Why Yasir Qadhi wants to talk about jihad. That's the title of the article in the New York Times, 10,000 words, cover story magazine. Why Yasir Qadhi wants to talk about jihad. Why? Because I wasn't allowed to talk about the real issues. I can't. I need to explain. The only way I can legitimately at the time tell my American Muslim, students, guys, you shouldn't be doing this, is if I can say, but what they can be doing is considered a legitimate jihad in Afghanistan. I couldn't say it because if I were, I'd be sitting in Guantanamo because they would say I'm supporting the truth, whatever, supporting the invasion of the troops, whatever it might be. So unless and until we acknowledge the elephants in the room, we can only do so much.
You guys, I just want to say that, see the cognitive dissonance of Yasir Qadhi, the cognitive dissonance that, he can't tell his students to do what, Islam teaches in Afghanistan because he has to be a certain way for the Americans. It's like I'll act like this, even though this is the right way, in his mind. This is what I have to do so that I don't go to Guantanamo Bay. So it's this cognitive dissonance of still embracing all this Islamic teaching and yet wanting to live in a prosperous, beautiful life in America. So that's what I see. Okay, that's my opinion of what I'm seeing, and I'm saying this because you're going to see it again in a few minutes. In a few minutes, you're going to see this cognitive dissonance again. And only it's clearer the next time. So,
about the notion of de-radicalization, because is it really radical to fight for your rights? That's the question we need to ask ourselves.
I think given the situation in Palestine at the moment and the fact that it's been a constant rallying call for jihadi Salafism, I think we're all anticipating what the events of the last 2 years how it might impact the spread of such groups and the radicalization of young Muslims and how difficult that is to address.
Yeah, so obviously, I'm very happy seeing the mobilization that is happening across the world for Gaza, and the fact that the next generation is inspired to do something. And I'm also happy, by and large, that we're not seeing violence, because that was not the case 2004, 5, 6, 2010. And you're speaking from England. Thousands of British youth, if I'm not mistaken, joined. In America, we had around 700, 800, we joined, and I'm against that. And I'm against it because, as I explained, it's going to cause more harm than damage, and it's not your battle to fight, and you're being used as a pawn because of your citizenship. You should not get involved. When it comes to Palestine, because of the geopolitical realities of that region, because no entity has allowed for people to defend physically, so we're not hearing that rhetoric. Rather, what we are hearing is political activism. What we are hearing is bringing aid to the people. And I think this is a very positive thing that, alhamdulillah, it has caused us to think and mature and whatnot. But at the same time, even as I say, individually in the Western world, obviously, we are not and should not be thinking of physical help. I have to say, isn't it a shame that as a global ummah, no country has offered physical help? That is something we have to acknowledge as well as a failure at the global level.
No country has offered help. What? Hello? Really?
Okay, so moving on to post-Salafism. This is a chapter of your book that Roxana thought that I would like and actually found it very insightful. In your final chapter, you discussed the phenomenon of post-Salafism, a term that is still unfamiliar to some. Can you define what post-Salafism is for our audience and which institutions and scholars consider to be prominent?
There's no academic definition of post-Salafism, but in my book, I use a definition that some academics have tried to do. It's a very ambiguous definition. Post-Salafism refers to an emerging amorphous category of Muslim scholars who seem to find Salafi theology and activism too narrow when it comes to confronting complex social and political arenas, right? That's a very vague definition. And because it is a new phenomenon, it's going to take a while for a more concrete definition to come. And we're still seeing it in live reality. I'm a product of post-Salafism. I have been defined by academic papers. There's like 4 papers written about me and a PhD at a university. I didn't know about this. I found out there's a PhD about me as well. So I have been described as a post-Salafi, and that's factually correct. Lots of other institutes, lots of other thinkers, in Arabia, Salman al-Auda has been described as being a post-Salafi. Hatim al-Auni is being described as being post-Salafi. Across the world, so many thinkers are basically, and what combines them are a number of things. First and foremost, all of them had some type of association within the movement.
Okay, guys, I'm going to fast forward this just a little bit to see if I get to the point that I want to. Okay, but I'm afraid that I may be either past it or I think it starts. Let me just see here.
Aspects of creed overall still. I am sympathetic to early Hanbali thought, especially Ibn Qudama, frankly, more than calls out the nakedness of the emperor and says, guys, enough is enough. I really don't care about the Sifat controversy. Whether you're Ash'ari, Sufi, Maturidi, Ibadi, it means nothing to me. I want to see what is your relationship with Allah and how are you treating the other people. To me, that's factually correct. Lots of other institutes, lots of other
is for our audience and which institutions and scholars.
So here's the imaginary monsters outside, in this case real monsters. They just cover themselves with that imaginary narrative. And because there's no easy answer, and because we are witnessing this in live time, it's a very difficult question. And it is a question that I myself am grappling with at a personal level, at a believing level, and as an academic, and as a preacher and teacher. Without a doubt, studying Islam in the madrasa and then studying in the academy has shaped me. And I've spoken about this in a lot more detail. I have a lecture online, if you're interested. It's called Between the Madrasa and the Academy. And I go over and I highlight that there's good and bad in both. And one of our problems is that most people in the madrasa and most people in the academy are refusing to acknowledge the good of the other. And they only concentrate on the negatives of the other. And as somebody who's lived in both and is still involved to this day in both, I still attend Amjad conferences I'm presenting and the other conferences I attend, and I still present papers, and I just published a book. This is my monograph. Had I still been in the academy, this would have got me my professorship. Alhamdulillah, I don't need to do that. I resigned. I resigned because of the pressure in the academy. I resigned because I can't speak about Israel in the academy. I resigned because my morality is subjugated to public opinion and polls. I can't preach in the mosque if I'm a member of the academy. My preaching of the mosque will impact my position in the academy. That's nonsensical to the academy, but that is the reality, right? So I am not a fan of creating animosity between these two strands. I actually believe it is important that both of them recognize that each one has much to offer the other. And I speak as somebody who's traversed both of them and respects both of them. There are also areas where we're going to have to agree to disagree. And we should be brave enough to just acknowledge it and move on. The origin of the Quran is one of them. I am a Muslim. When I'm preaching and teaching, I will use the Quran as evidence, end of story. When I'm presenting an academic paper, I understand for my audience, the Quran is not an evidence. I understand this. Doesn't mean I don't believe it in my life, but I will not then use it in the same way. And I'll become.
Okay, just in case, see, he's talking here like when he's talking to Muslims and stuff like that, the Quran is, to them, the word of Allah. But when he talks to intellectuals and to, academics, they don't consider it the word of nothing, word of Allah. They just, they're looking for evidence. They're looking for historicity. They're looking for truth. They're looking for reality. They're looking for, real evidence, historical, archaeological, and the Quran doesn't offer that. And so what he's saying is it doesn't work with the West, so.
Third person. Well, the Quran states this, whereas in a lecture I'll say Allah says. It's the same thing, but how you phrase it and the utilization is going to be slightly different. So in some areas we're going to have to agree to disagree. As you're aware, and I think you have in your channel interviewed such people as well. Many of the modern academics love to discuss the origin of the Quran, right? Of like the parallels of other. Like the Alexander story, other stories, right? And their goal here, even if it's not explicit, is very clear. Their goal is to illustrate that the Prophet ﷺ was very crafty, very ingenious.
I don't think he was crafty or ingenious. I think he was being used.
He tapped into all of these legends, and then he...
Yes, he did. Every single one of them. Alexander the Great, Solomon and his flying carpet, Solomon and his talking ants, Abraham in the fire with the lizards blowing on the fire, the Jesus creating birds out of clay, talking when he was a baby in the cradle. He took it all from the fairy tales that were around in his day. And they even said that, even in the Quran it says that he's called the ear, because he'd hear something and the next day it'd end up in the Quran.
Constructed the Quran, right? That is an inherent bias of the Western Academy because
it's not inherent bias, it's the truth.
Refusing to acknowledge the theological presumption that we have. And that is...
The theological presumption is that they believe that this is from Allah.
The Quran is inspiration from Allah. I believe this. And therefore, that type of talk will just not resonate with me because I'm not... So we have to agree to disagree. Hadith is another area. We're going to have to...
Okay, this is where it gets interesting, and this is where the cognitive dissonance will rear its head again. So, and by the way, the stuff he says about the Quran is not true, but anyway.
Agree to disagree. There is no... Now, I hope there is, but as of yet, as somebody who's my undergraduate was in the College of Hadith. So I specialized, and it is said, and I'm not just saying because I'm a graduate, this was the well-known reality, that the College of Hadith in the University of Medina in the 90s and the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they've changed it now. It was considered to be the most advanced study of Hadith at the undergraduate level in the entire world. And as somebody who went through that and has talked to other people from other institutes, I would very much agree with that, the amount of studying that we did. So what I'm trying to say is I've studied hadith inside out. I have ijazat more than I do. I forgot how many I have. I have plenty of ijazat. And I've also studied the historical critical method. In fact, for a period of my life, my second year of Yale, before I decided Ibn Taymiyyah, I really wanted to write a PhD on the isnad analysis and basically a Muslim defense of it,
Isnad, and I know you guys all know this, but I'll just say it for those who don't. Isnad is where which is what the hadith are based on. I mean, hadith, the authenticity of a hadith, if it's weak, da'if, or if it's hasan, or if it's masnu', or if it's sahih, what determines that is the isnad. The isnad is the chain of narrators. And so every hadith has that this person said to this person, 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 that Muhammad said this. And you get 3 words from Muhammad after 10 pages of this person said to this. And the strength of the hadith is determined by who is in that chain. Is it someone who's reliable, or is it someone like Hafs, the author of the most famous Quran in the world today, the Hafs Quran? He was considered a thief, and he was considered as his hadiths were weak. In hadith, he was considered weak and unreliable, but he wasn't considered unreliable to write the Quran, which is the most famous Quran in the world today. Arabic is the Hafs. But anyway, the strength of the hadith is based on the trustworthiness of the people who in the chain of narrators. So that's what isnad means. I know a lot of you already knew that.
Which would have been utilizing the historical critical method. So anyway, my point that the College of Hadith in the University of Medina in the 90s and the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they've changed it now. It was considered to be the most advanced study of Hadith at the undergraduate level in the entire world. And as somebody who went through that and has talked to other people from other institutes, I would very much agree with that, the amount of studying that we did. So what I'm trying to say is I've studied hadith inside out. I have ijazat more than I do. I forgot how many I have. I have plenty of ijazat.
Ijazat means like prizes.
And I've also studied the historical critical method. In fact, for a period of my life,
historical critical method. Okay, now the historical critical method is like what you learn in America.
Second year of Yale, before I decided Ibn Taymiyyah, I really wanted to write a PhD on the isnad analysis and basically a Muslim defense of it, which would have been utilizing the historical critical method. So anyway, my point being, I'm well aware. My preliminary conclusion, and please, audience, understand, I could be wrong.
This is very important, guys. This is right here, the nuclear bomb he's about to drop.
And if I'm wrong, please correct me. My preliminary conclusion is there is no middle ground. And historical critical method and isnad analysis are 2 diametrically opposed ways.
Okay, so he's saying the historical critical method, which is the meat grinder that historical study and history, the way they do it in the critical method, like at the universities, the way they study things and using these methods and techniques to study history, which they have put the Bible through as well. Okay, now the Bible, the historical critical method works with the Bible, but it doesn't work with the Hadith. It doesn't work with the Quran for sure, but it doesn't work with the Hadith. And so what he's saying is the so-called, I don't know if you guys have heard this before, but Muslims love to use these 2 words, Hadith science, as if it's science. okay, about how to tell if it's sahih or da'if or hasan or masnu' or whatever, okay? And he's saying that when you have the hadith science and the historical critical method, they're in two different planets.
Of looking at early Islam and reports, and I don't find much commonality between them as of yet. Obviously, in small areas, yeah, but overall, two diametrically opposed epistemologies. That having been said, therefore, one will have to navigate the religious side of things if you are a believing Sunni, Hadith believer, in a different epistemology. And when you are arguing in the academic world, you'll have to use a different epistemology.
Okay, so here's the cognitive dissonance. What is in the hadith doesn't survive the meat grinder of historical critical the historical critical method. So it doesn't survive the meat grinder of Western academia. So what do? You act this way when you're with Muslims and you're preaching in the mosque. You act as if everything you're saying is true. But when you're in academia, you follow the historical critical method, which totally is a meat grinder that has spit this thing out and said this is unreliable. But when you're with the Muslims in the mosque, you pretend that you believe this. You act this way here, but you act this way here. This is the cognitive dissonance of Islam. And he's telling you how to do that. He's telling you be this way here and be this way there. But in reality, the hadith needs to be put through the meat grinder. It needs to be put through the meat grinder of Western historical critical method to show the reliability or unreliability of the hadith. And Jay Smith did a fantastic job of totally dismantling this. So if you haven't watched what Hatun Tash and Jay Smith did, I encourage you to watch that.
So in some areas, there's good, healthy overlap. In some areas, we'll politely agree to disagree. And in some areas, they're diametrically opposed. This is my preliminary analysis, and I would love to be proven wrong. And I would love for somebody to come and say, no, you are absolutely incorrect. And we can prove hadith via the historical critical method, and this is how we do it. And I would literally thank that person and be the first to buy the book and love to see it. As of yet, though, they're diametrically opposed.
I want to play that again, but I want you to hear what he said again.
This is my preliminary analysis, and I would love to be proven wrong.
Love to be proven wrong, but you know what? I got to give him credit here. He is trying to be honest here. The fact is, the hadith does not stand up to the standards of Western critical historical criticism. It just doesn't stand up. And he's being honest about it.
And I would love for somebody to come and say, no, you are absolutely incorrect. And we can prove hadith via the historical critical method. And this is how we do it.
I'm hoping his next book is going to be, I Am a Christian Now. Islam just doesn't stand up. It did not survive the meat grinder.
And I would literally thank that person and be the first to buy the book and love to see it. As of yet, though, I'm a little bit pessimistic, and I don't see there to be much of a commonality. So we're going to have to simply say, if you believe in the, that the Sunnah has been preserved by the Hadith, you're going to have to follow a certain epistemology, a certain paradigm. And if you are, like, as you're aware, and you're an academic channel, right? You're well aware, nobody in the academy affirms the Muslim Sunni science of Hadith.
Nobody in the academy, meaning in academia, in higher learning, has any regard for the Muslim Hadith science. Let's listen to that again. Okay.
hadith, you're going to have to follow a certain epistemology, a certain paradigm. And if you are, like, as you're aware, and you're an academic channel, right? You're well aware, nobody in the academy affirms the Muslim Sunni science of hadith.
Nobody in the academy verifies the Muslim Sunni Hadith um, science.
Nobody. It is
Nobody.
considered to be completely discredited.
It's considered to be completely discredited. So this Hadith science that we always are hearing about, how they determine this is sahih, this is da'if, this is right, it's completely discredited. And I love what Jay Smith said. You know, he said that these hadiths, some of them were so late. You know, there's two groups. There's the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. The Sahaba are kind of like like what we would consider like Mark and John. No, excuse me, will be like Matthew and John. Matthew and John knew Jesus. Matthew and John walked with Jesus. They were eyewitnesses. They saw Jesus. They knew Jesus. They believed in Jesus. They were with him. They saw him face to face. They talked to him. The Tabi'een would be like Mark and Luke, because Mark and Luke were not necessarily there with Jesus. They were second hand, but they knew the people who knew Jesus. They knew the people who knew Jesus. That's the Tabi'een. Okay? And so in Islam, this is how they say Sahaba would be like kind of like the apostles, and the Tabi'een would be like the disciples like Mark and Luke, who maybe didn't know Jesus personally, but they knew the people who knew Jesus. But there's these and according to what like Jay Smith was saying, these hadiths don't even go nowhere near these guys, the like the Matthew or the John or the Luke or Mark, you know, the Sahaba or the Tabi'een. Okay, and it doesn't, yeah, and so what he's saying here, this is, you know, I wish I had my phone because I would like to make this a YouTube video. It is completely discredited. So the so-called Hadith science is completely discredited. Completely discredited by Western historical method. I mean, by the academy. Academy meaning academia, you know. So this guy just drops these nuclear bombs. Okay.
And I don't see there to be much of a commonality. So we're going to have to simply say, if you believe in the, you know, that the Sunnah has been preserved by the Hadith, you're going to have to follow a certain epistemology, a certain paradigm. And if you are, like, as you're aware, and you're an academic channel, right? You're well aware, nobody in the academy affirms the Muslim Sunni science of Hadith. Nobody. It is
nobody affirms the Muslim Sunni science of Hadith.
Considered to be completely discredited. I'm just
considered to be totally discredited. Dang.
Being factual. I'm describing. I'm not, you know.
I'm just being factual. You see, this is kind of like what happened with the holes in the narrative. You know, remember when he told Muhammad Hijab, we're not supposed to talk about these things in front of people. Yeah.
I'm not, saying which one is right or wrong. I'm just saying the max you'll get, like Harold Motsky and others are going to say, well, we can say that some hadith definitely go back to some tabi'un. Mm-hmm. You know, that's like the max you can say.
The max you can say is some hadith may go back to some tabi'un, like meaning that some of the hadith may go back to some of the second generation of Muhammad's followers, not the first generation, the Sahaba, but the Tabi'een. Okay, they may. He's not saying for sure they do, and it's not all of them. It's some may. They don't. But listen to Jay Smith. None of them do.
As for definitively stating that the hadith go back to the Prophet ﷺ, at this stage of my life, I will have to say this is what I say as a believer, not as an academic.
See, this is the cognitive dissonance. This is the cognitive dissonance. This is what I say as a believer, not as an academic. So you live one way as a believer, you live another way as an academic. This is what Islam will do to you. You have to have this cognitive dissonance. And, it's...
At this stage. And if some...
By the way, for those of you who don't know cognitive dissonance, it's holding two conflicting beliefs at the same time. Having two conflicting or opposite beliefs at the same time.
Somebody proves me wrong, then I would love to come across that and say, no, we can prove academically. Because here's the point. We can academically prove, by and large, that the Prophet ﷺ preached the Quran, the words that we have today. The Uthmanic Mus'haf, that's like a solid given.
No, it's not a solid given. It's not a solid given. He's wrong about this. And please, if you haven't heard it, go listen to Jay Smith talk about it. This is one of the mistakes he makes, because it's not a solid given. Nobody has the Uthmani Quran, the complete manuscript from the 7th century. Nobody has it. So this is wrong, what he's saying right here. But you see, it's good. He's ready to throw the hadith out under the bus, to throw the hadith, but he's not at the Quran level yet. His next book, he's probably going to be, I'm out of here. I hope it happens before the rapture.
Right? The wordings of the Quran, by and large, we can academically, of course, believers, we say that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the academy has pretty much proven scientifically, through the historical critical method, that there's an Uthmanic Mus'haf.
No, it hasn't.
Yeah.
That much is beyond reasonable doubt.
No, it's not.
And the fact that there's an Uthmanic Mus'haf, we're talking about...
There is not.
Senior companions all being alive, right? So...
No.
By and large, the normative interpretation of the modern academy is that what the Quran claims to be, the wordings of the Quran, the preaching of the Quran, the teaching of the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ said them.
No, he didn't.
This is the mainstream, and we can prove this.
No,
as of yet, I don't think we can do that to the hadith literature. And we're just going to have to understand these are two different epistemologies. So when I become Sheikh Yasser and I go and preach and teach, I will quote Sahih Bukhari and I will quote Sahih Muslim and I will say قال الله قال رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم, and that's the preacher. And I understand in the academy I cannot quote Bukhari and this will be what the Prophet said. I understand this, so I'm just going to have to use a different, epistemology.
Okay, there's the cognitive dissonance again. When I'm a sheikh preaching in the mosque, and I have to say this, say that Sahih Bukhari is totally right on, quote it like it's the word of Muhammad, But then when I'm with people who really know the reality of the situation, I can't say that because they know it's not true. So, this guy is educated, okay, and I'm not educated at his level, but I can see the cognitive dissonance. And so...
Does that answer your question? I don't know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
As someone who has been considered the unofficial spokesman for mainstream Salafism in English for over 20...
Okay. So that's the Yasser Qadhi. New holes in it. Wow, you guys, I made it to 59 minutes and 47 seconds, almost exactly an hour. You guys... Really, here I'll put the link here if you want to. You really need to this is I don't know. You know, I'm not as educated as a lot of these other guys are, like Jay Smith and David Wood and all them. But for me, I'm thinking, dude, I think this is bigger than the holes in the narrative. I think this is bigger than the holes in the narrative because he is like saying with such certainty, saying with such certainty about the hadith that, dude, throw it under the bus. All we can do is throw it under the bus. There's nothing else to do with this hadith but throw it under the bus. You know, so I know if he was to come on, he would say that that's not what he's saying. And wouldn't it be a trip if he came on? I was expecting Muhammad Hijab to come on the other day when I was talking about, oh, okay, here's Jay's video on it. Jay did, I mean, this right here, this listening to this is because Jay's been saying this stuff for so long. You heard some Muslims claim the hadith are false because Jews and Christians infiltrated Islam and wrote them. Well, actually, that's the reality of the situation is that Muhammad or whoever wrote the hadiths, because it wasn't Muhammad, it was 300 years after Muhammad, they went to the Christian sources and picked to the Jews and Christians, took their stories and put it into the Quran and into the hadith. So, and there are direct quotes from the Bible in the hadith, direct quotes from the Bible in the hadith. So, you know, they took it where they got it from. So critical thinking is only possible if you are allowed to have full access to all the hadiths, not only by your scholars the way they yes, Islam is not yes, but you know what, you guys, just think about what do Muslims have to give up if they give up the hadith. I mean, this thing has been seriously. It was like it's almost. I kind of, you know, from my limited knowledge, it was almost as if I felt like the hadith in the meat grinder. It started with Crown Prince Muhammad Salman said, "Let's get rid of this and let's only keep 100 of these crazy hadiths," and you know, it was a movement there for a few months, and Father Zechariah did a bunch of stuff on it because Father Zechariah has been talking about exactly this for so many years, you know, and exposing this. And so when the Crown Prince came out and said, "Yeah, let's just get rid of of the hadith," he was saying, "Yeah, and the Quran is next," you know. But to hear Yasser Qadi say this, you know, because you know one thing about Yasser Qadi is he is an academic, and he knows the value of academia. He knows they're not just saying stuff because they hate Islam. They're not saying stuff because they hate the Quran. They're just as critical of Christians and Christianity as they are of Islam. But they are committed to proof and evidence. And so, you know, the Bible has been put through the meat grinder. It has, and it's survived. But now it's the Hadith and the Quran are going through it. And the Hadith didn't make it. The Hadith didn't make it. According to Yasser Qadi, the Hadith, the method of Islamic Hadith science has been totally discredited. Yo, boy, yeah. Yo, boy, yeah. Totally discredited. Wow. And I've seen Muslims claiming the British Empire wrote some of those hadiths to discredit. Really? Well, and if you want to talk about when these books, when actual full copies of these books, again, Jay Smith he's the man in that department. He's got the info, and he's wow. We're so blessed to have a brother like that who's got so much knowledge like that to help us through this. So, okay, guys. Well, that was kind of what I wanted to. That was kind of what I wanted to talk about, and so I know you guys have heard about it already. I know several people have already done stuff about it, but I had to do something too, and so okay. Well, all right. Okay, guys. Well, I think it's late, and so I think Andrew Martin wrote an article on corrupting the Bible. Awesome. Thank you. Oh, is Jose here? Is Jose here? I don't know, Jose. I think he got mad at me yesterday. I don't think he's here today. Yeah, he was. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and put a link in case there is a Muslim here. Oh, he's not here. Oh, okay. All right. All right. Well, I will go ahead and I could do a song. It's one. It's a little bit late, you guys, for me to do a song. So we'll try to do it tomorrow night. And so thank you for hanging out. If you haven't done it, please do it now. Jesus help me. Jesus forgive me. Jesus come into my heart. Jesus help me. Jesus forgive me. Jesus come into my heart. يسوع ساعدني. يسوع سامحني. يسوع ادخل قلبي. We love you, but much more importantly, he loves you. Have a great night.
If you have ever wondered why dull apologists lie so much, it's because on a rare occasion that they tell the truth, this happens.
One of the reasons I accepted Islam was the scientific miracles. I'll be honest with you. And now we know that this whole scientific miracles was absolute nonsense.
You're going to have to repeat that.
That the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say.